Welcome to the Successor Seat podcast, presented by Dominion Business Advisors, hosted by Cameron Teich, a certified exit planning advisor. Each week, Cameron talks about the real work of handing a business to the next generation and what it takes for the next generation to be ready to receive it.
Hello, and welcome to the Successor Seat. I am Cameron Teich. This show is for owners who are thinking about handing the business to the next generation and for the people who will receive it. We focus on the practical work of transfer, the parts that actually determine whether a family transition holds or quietly falls apart. Today, we're talking about a distinction most families never make. Ownership and leadership are not the same thing. They run on different clocks. Treating them as one event is where a lot of transitions start to go wrong. Here's something simple to try. Write one sentence that describes what done looks like for a transfer of ownership of the company. Then write a second sentence for leadership. If those two sentences sound almost the same, you're still missing the distinction that actually matters. Most families never do that exercise. They plan the handoff as one day. Papers get signed, the attorneys walk through the stack, ownership moves, and everyone treats the transition as finished. That framing is the problem, at least in the cases that quietly go wrong later. I'm going through a version of this with my own family right now. The distinction between two transfers keeps proving useful in ways I didn't fully expect when we started. Here's the core of it. Ownership and leadership are two separate transfers. They run on two separate, different clocks. Ownership can move on a date, a gift, a sale, a stage redemption, an installment note. Whatever form it takes, there is a moment when the stock or the membership interest sits in a different name. Lawyers draft the instruments, CPAs model the tax consequences, a valuation professional sets the number the family will use. The work is technical. It's also finite. Leadership doesn't work that way. It moves through credibility. The confidence that employees, customers, lenders, and vendors either give or withhold over ordinary decisions across months and years. Whether the new person can be trusted with the hard calls. Whether the relationship still holds once the founder stops answering the phone. Whether the credit risk has changed, and whether key managers decide to stay. That process doesn't care about a closing date. It either starts years earlier or it fails years later. No document can force it. When you treat the two as one event, the calendar usually forces a particular sequence: ownership first, leadership later. What you get, often, is a successor who owns the company on paper while real operating authority still sits with the parent. Or the reverse. The successor has already been running the place for years, holds the relationships, holds the practical authority, and yet still doesn't own the equity. Both patterns show up often enough to be recognizable. Neither looks like a successful transition from the inside. Let's make the failures concrete here. One version looks like this. Ownership transfers. The successor holds the stock. The org chart shows the parent gone or shifted to a board seat. But in daily reality, the team still routes every meaningful decision through the parent. Vendors keep calling the old number. Customers still expect the founder on the difficult job. The successor owns the company and cannot lead it because the people who matter have not transferred their confidence. Legal change happened, but rational change did not. The other version stays quieter and often more permanent. For years, the successor has sat inside the business, running operations, knows the numbers. Employees already treat that person as the decision maker, but ownership never fully moves. Or it moves late and only partially. Equity stays with the parent or gets divided so the person doing the work ends up without controlling interest. Leadership is already present, but full ownership is not. Frustration can build. Options can narrow. Sometimes the successor eventually walks away. Both patterns share the same root error, treating a multi-year relational process as if it were a closing date. Once you stop collapsing the two transfers into a single event, the work itself becomes much clearer. Sequencing can be deliberate instead of accidental. In most healthy family transitions, leadership transfer begins first. It's slower. It's also less reversible. The successor has to take real authority while the parent is still present to support, correct, and eventually step back. The parent has to stop serving as the final answer on ordinary decisions. Mistakes that the old arrangement would have prevented now have to be tolerated. The successor has to earn confidence from people who once watched them grow up. That work is hard. It cannot be scheduled the same way that a closing can. Ownership transfer can wait. Once leadership is underway and the financial and tax structure has been designed properly, the equity can move. Staging is available. Conditions can be attached to milestones. Because it is a set of documents and numbers, this transfer is much more controllable than the relational one. Owners often rush ownership because it feels like visible progress. It's usually the wrong lever. Separating the timelines also forces cleaner questions about readiness on both sides. If you're the owner, you have to face whether day-to-day control can actually be released, not merely whether papers can be signed. If you're the successor, you have to face whether the responsibility is wanted and whether it can be carried, not merely whether stock is acceptable as an inheritance. Soft pedaling those questions becomes harder once everything is no longer compressed into a single transition plan. Here's a concrete way to test it. If you're the owner, ownership is finished when the equity sits in the right names under the right structure and the funding path is clear. Leadership is finished when the people whose confidence matters most treat the successor as the final authority on ordinary decisions. If you are no longer the default problem solver, those two sentences should not sound the same. If you're the successor, list the specific people whose confidence currently sits low, medium, or high. Key employees, major customers, the primary lender, long-term vendors, any non-operating siblings who will still have to have a stake in the outcomes. Moving those relationships is the leadership transfer. No attorney can do that work for you. Specialists still matter. Your attorney owns the legal instruments of ownership transfer. The CPA owns the tax structure and the modeling of different methods. A valuation professional owns the number the family will use for gift or sale purposes. A wealth manager owns the question of whether the owner can step away without financial risk. Those conversations are necessary. They do not replace the leadership work, and they cannot be completed usefully until the family has decided that leadership transfer is already underway and ownership transfer is the next deliberate step rather than the first step. At the $1 to $50 million scale, family transitions are rarely blocked by a missing legal document. Unresolved questions about control, identity, fairness, and whether the next generation actually wants the job do the blocking. Collapsing ownership and leadership into one event tends to hide those questions behind a stack of paperwork. Separating the two timelines surfaces them early enough to be addressed or at least faced. Pace changes as well. Once decisions are clear, ownership can be designed and executed in months. Leadership cannot. Starting the leadership transfer years before any equity moves gives the owner room to correct, coach, and watch whether the successor can carry the weight. Waiting until retirement is imminent removes that room. The calendar then forces a rushed ownership transfer and leaves the leadership work half finished. Nothing here argues for delay. The call is for deliberate sequencing. Begin the hard relational work now. Let the legal and tax work follow the clarity that relational work produces. Documents will still be necessary. They will simply solve the right problem at the right time. Few families ever make this distinction explicit. They plan for a handoff day and discover, sometimes years later, that the day only moved the stock. The real transfer was never finished. Making the distinction early costs little. Failing to make it tends to cost years. Thanks for listening to the Successor Seat. If you found this useful, pass it to the person on the other side of the table. And if you're willing, leave a 5-star review. It helps other owners and successors find the show. Until next time, keep the two transfers separate. We'll talk again next week.
That was Cameron Teich on the Successor Seat podcast, presented by Dominion Business Advisors. This material is educational only. It is not legal, tax, financial, investment, or accounting advice. Consult your own licensed professionals before acting on anything discussed here. We'll be back next week.